Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I am CS the Viking Gamer, and today we are going to be painting up Octern Glimscry from Warhammer Cursed Cities. He's one of like 3 models that I have left to paint for the heroes of the game, so we're going to go ahead and get him painted up today. Alright, so this model has a few interesting features to it. We've got some nice little decorative books and a staff with what looks like maybe a gem or globe on top, and a few scrolls tucked into his belt. So it's going to pose a few interesting little challenges, so let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I wanted to take care of was his robe and cloak, but it was divided into 2 parts, and I wanted the cloak to have just kind of like a 2-tone difference in color, but I didn't want to do any wet blending on the model. So I decided to paint the upper section of the cloak in a darker shade of Space Wolf Gray, just to start things out and give the cloak a little bit of definition and color. Once that was dry, I used some Briar Queen Chill to add a similar color but a much lighter tone to the lower robes. And this worked out pretty nicely and gave a very definite difference in color. But as the paint dried, I realized that the lower sections of the robes were a little bit too bright for my liking, but we'll fix that up in a few more steps. Now, using some Nazdrag Yellow, I'm going to touch up all of the pages of the books and the scrolls, anything that's going to be paper or parchment is going to be hit up with this color. That's going to give it a nice kind of aged, yellowed parchment appearance. Now I'm going to use a little bit of snakebite leather. I'm going to use this pretty sparingly on the model. There's only a couple of little areas like this little wrap to hold the charm onto his staff, and then a few bindings on a couple of the books and the scroll at his waist. So we're just going to do a few little detail bits in the snakebite leather to kind of give the appearance of some leather ties and wrappings around a few things. With the leather bits finished, we can move on to the skin tones, and for that I'm going to use some Dark Oath Flesh. Now, I want him to have kind of a pale-ish appearance, but he's only got his hands as exposed skin, so I'm just doing a light coating to kind of give that pale but slightly tanned appearance. Next, using some Flesh Terrors Red, I started doing all the detail work on one of the books. Now, I want each of these books to be a slightly different color, and this one under the left side is going to be a nice bright red. While that's drying, I'll use a little bit of Griffcharger Gray to lightly touch up his beard. I want him to have like the appearance of a grizzled old wizard, so doing this will still allow the natural highlight of the gray on the beard to show through. Now, using some Aethermatic Blue, I pick out some of the details on another book. This one's got some nice little recessed areas that I think we're going to do in a different color, so I'm just doing the outside edges of the book in this, just to kind of help draw a little bit of attention to some extra detail. And the third and final book is going to be touched up with some Lexion Purple. Having the books as 3 different colors really helps to add color to a otherwise not heavily detailed model. Now using a little bit of wildwood, I start painting up his staff. Now there's not a ton of detail on the staff, but I did have to stop and wipe away a little bit of spillover, and then I dropped my brush, which resulted in me having to pick it up, clean it off, and then get back to painting. But up at the top of the staff, there's this nice little gnarled section around the globe, and I didn't want to have to paint over a bunch of things a few dozen times to get everything right, so I really just kind of focused a lot of my attention on this area to make sure I didn't have to do any touch-ups or spillover cleanup. With that done, I grabbed a little bit of Magos Purple, and this is going to go inside of the little extra details that are on this one book that we touched up with the Aethermatic Blue. Now using a little bit of Lead Belcher, I'm going to pick out a few of the raised details on the corners of the books. Now, a lot of old books had some extra bindings or embellishments on the covers, and I think that's what they were going for here, so I decided to just give them a little bit of a nice metallic shine with the Lead Belcher. And then the raised embossing around the Magos Purple got a quick little touch as well. Now, off camera, I do paint the globe at the top of the staff with the Lead Belcher. I just forgot to do that on camera. My apologies. And now we can use a little bit of Agrax Earthshade to paint over the mask on his face. This is going to give it a little bit of a gritty but pale appearance. And I kind of like that in this mask. Definitely looks a little bit creepy though. Next, I finally got around to darkening up the lower section of the cloak with a wash of Drakenhof Nightshade. This adds a little bit of a deeper blue coloration to the lower section of the cloak and kind of helps tie it in with the upper section as well. You can kind of see it helps darken the recesses as a nice little extra bonus. Now I busted out my technical paint of Spiritstone Red and very carefully painted over the shiny silver globe at the top of the staff. I wanted it to appear as though he had some kind of like fiery gem at the end of his wizard's staff, just to kind of represent like an arcane focus or some kind of magical artifact that he had with him. Now moving on to the base of the model, I painted over all of the sandy bits with some raw sienna. Now this is mostly just to kind of help tie his base in with all the other cursed hero bases, and it really kind of helps to unify all of the models in the series as well. Next, I used a 50-50 mix of gray and neutral gray to make a highlight color that I used to just touch all of the raised areas on the upper and lower section of the cloak. Just to kind of give a little bit of lighting highlights that would represent where the fabric had folded and was catching the light more than the rest of the cloak. And it also has a nice little effect of highlighting the shadowed and recessed areas as well. That looks pretty good. Now moving back to the base, I grabbed some gray from Artist's Loft, and this is just going to pick out all of these stones and rocky textures on the base. While that was drying, I grabbed some metallic bronze and just touched up a couple of the embossings on one of the books, just to kind of make it a little bit more different than the other two. And then I noticed that the charm hanging from his staff looked a little plain with just silver, so I touched that up as well. Now using a little bit of Agrak's Earthshade, I went back over all of the yellow pages on the books and scrolls. This will give them a much more weathered appearance, and kind of makes them a little bit more historically accurate as well, since old parchment was a very thin tanned animal hide. So it kind of gives it that same historic classical appearance. And now the final touch of dry brushing the base with a little bit of neutral gray to kind of pick out the raised highlighted areas. And then I do a very light stippling dry brush on the beard just to kind of add a little bit more gray. And there we have it. Octern Glimscry is finished. And here we have the finished piece. You know, as I'm finishing out all of these Warhammer Cursed City heroes, I'm definitely thinking I'm going to have to build a new kind of like little mini tavern display to put them all in. Project idea for the future, I guess. Alright, so this was an interesting one. There wasn't a whole lot of major details, like the overall model is pretty plain. You know, you've got the cloak and all that. But when you get to the books, there's a surprising amount of detail, and it was a lot of fun to put this together and then paint all the little bits to kind of draw attention to the smaller areas of the model. So, yeah, that is 6 heroes down, 2 to go. Who do I have left? I've got Burgot Corpse Eater and Dagny Holdenstock. I'm pretty sure that's the Dwarf hero and the Ogre hero. So, yeah, those 2 are the last in the Cursed City heroes. Can't wait to get them painted up and finish them out. So thank you everyone for watching. Please hit that like button, subscribe for future content, comment down in the comments section, and we will see everyone next episode.